Okay, so we will start our session today. So we're going to go on to a new topic, and this is pharmacology. And so we will spend the time today going through the basics of Ayurvedic pharmacology. So there were some revision, some points that we discussed earlier, that in Ayurveda, treatments are done with the use of substances and also without the use of substances. So Ayurveda says that physical medicine is only one aspect of treatment. There are non-physical interventions also, and medicine is just one part of it. So broadly we can say that treatments are of two types: with medicine and without medicine. So the treatment with medicines is very predictable. It follows very clear principles of pharmacology, whereas treatment without medicines is dependent on the individual influence of the healer. So it's important to know that Ayurveda accepts both methods of treatment, those with medicines and also without medicines. So it's very difficult to explain the modality of action of non-medical interventions. Although they might be effective, they are not always predictable, and their effects may vary from person to person. But Ayurveda says that pharmacology actually follows very definite principles, definite rules and laws, and therefore it is always effective. Yes, so we have treatment with and without medicines, and treatment with medicines is predictable. And today we are going to deal with only the principles of pharmacology, of how Ayurveda uh, talks about treatment with physical substances. So if you look at the Pharmacopoeia of Ayurveda, you might ask a question: how many plants? Ayurveda uses not only plants but also animal and mineral substances. And Ayurveda has used maybe around 1,200 to 1,500 species of medicinal plants through the centuries, and an evolutionary history of at least 3,000 years. However, this makes up only 10% of the plants identified and used for medicinal purposes by tribals, folk communities, because this is the biggest challenge. There are properties mentioned for a specific number of medicinal plants, and they don't make up the entire list of medicinal plants used around the world. So in Ayurveda, comparatively, like if you take even in India, about 9,000 plants are used for medicinal purposes, mentions only 1,200. So the real challenge in Ayurveda is to study the properties of medicinal plants. It takes a long time, and it is quite elaborate. So we will look at why in Ayurveda only very limited substances are described. That's because Ayurveda does not accept a plant as medicinal unless it is very thoroughly studied. Medicinal plant for maybe a minimum 5 years and up to more than 100 years accepted in the Ayurvedic year. We can say that Ayurveda insists on of natural substances in the world, please excuse me, before they can actually be included and accepted in pharmacopoeia. why are fewer plants used in Ayurveda? So why out of 9,000 Ayurveda uses only 14%? Because Ayurveda also in the world is potential. So when we study the pharmacology of Ayurveda, people outside India, we are going to face more plants mentioned in the Ayurvedic text may not be available in your place. So plants mentioned in Ayurvedic texts are not found maybe in Russia or in USA, and then we will get into real trouble how to actually use the plants in the world that can potentially use for medicinal. There are medicinal properties of only few plants are the only best for us. Learn the method of process of plant which are not described in the texts. I want to lay out all of our discussion here is first of all to understand how Ayurveda understands properties of medicinal plants and other substances, and how many such plants have been described in the Ayurvedic texts. We will have to look at many of these plants are available in your region. I will give a list of them mentioned in Ayurveda. Using that can identify which plants are in the region. And on the other hand, there may be many plants in the region which are not described in the Ayurvedic texts. In principle, Ayurveda says that we can use them. But now the question is to understand their properties because they are not described in Ayurveda. So we have to identify the plants which are locally available, which are already mentioned in Ayurvedics, and the methodology to assess the properties of plants which are not mentioned in the texts. So this is that to keep in mind when we study Ayurvedic pharmacology. So in one of the texts that we have to medicinal plants near rivers, near mountains, near lakes, deep forests, human settlements, our new medicinal substances because the earth is full. So this means that we can medicinal plants. So in principle, able to understand the properties of medicinal plants outside India in places like Russia or US, and linked to the principles of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is not so it does not mean in Ayurveda should use only the medicinal plants from India or only the medicinal plants used from the with this introduction, I want to point out some important basic principles in Ayurveda. This is very, very important. Herbs can also be dangerous. Just you're making medicines from plants mean that they are always safe. Many of the plants are poisonous and they may have poisonous effects on your system. So even if they are hard to study them very carefully before they can be. And that's the reason why there are very few described. They've taken more than 3 centuries to really understand the properties of a few thousand. So the Charaka Samhita, one of Ayurveda, says that if you do not know about a plant thoroughly, then it works like a weapon. It's like fire or lightning, and it can harm or kill the person. And on the other hand, once we know about medicines very well, then they work like. And two things are there that you must thoroughly understand the properties of a plant. And the second thing is that you know them well, they should be used properly. So only then we will get proper results. So these are the two concepts, and we will continue to Ayurveda by studying a drug adequately. So what Ayurveda says is that if we should study a drug solely, a fourfold approach has been outlined in the classical texts: nomenclature, identification, properties, and applications. So we will try to understand. So when we will get the detailed knowledge of how Ayurveda studies a plant before it gets accepted as a source of medicine. To know whether so far makes sense lies what we have discussed so far is that in Ayurveda, with and without medicines is religious or spiritual, and mantras to stand of action of these non-medical issues. On the other hand, treatment medicines are based on logical principles, like principle of Ayurvedic pharmacology, and it is possible for us to predict the of drugs based on the principles of pharmacology. And now Ayurveda agrees every substance in the world potential medicinal use, plants or animal or instances from anywhere, from any part of the earth, in principle it's possible to accept. So, Ayurveda has studied only 1,000 medicinal plants in detail, and the rest have not been documented. This is because it takes a long time to adequately understand the proper plant, and Ayurveda insists that we have understood the properties of a medicinal before accepting. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, okay. So now we will look at these principles that there are two steps in drug development in Ayurveda. So one is the study of individual drugs, and the other is the study of combining drugs. So there's two steps. That first we have to study drugs individually, and this means nomenclature, identification, and properties. And then we study the combination of drugs, combining drugs, and this is called as yukti or applications. So the goal of this process is to learn about well-known plants in such a way that we develop the skills to study unknown plants. So this is the process of the study of pharmacology in Ayurveda, and now we will look at each of these steps in greater detail. So here you can see that there is drug development in Ayurveda means discovery of individual drugs and development of formulations. So both are important in application of Ayurvedic pharmacology. First is that we understand the properties of individual substances, and then we learn about how to combine them. So you can see that there are two methods of drug development in Ayurveda. and one of which is the study of individual properties of substances, and the other combination. So both are important steps in Ayurvedic pharmacology. And the discovery of new individual drugs has been a slow process. So every 100 years, there has been just 20 to 30 new drugs introduced in Ayurveda. Whereas developing new formulations by combining known herbs, that has been very creative, and thousands of formulations have been created by physicians in their day-to-day practice. So I don't know whether this point is very clear. I want to again emphasize this is a very important difference, that it is one thing to study plants individually. As I told earlier, individual plants are rarely used in Ayurvedic practice. We don't use single herbs. We use combinations. So in order to make combinations, we need to understand individual herbs in great detail. And once we know these herbs here, we combine them in many formulations, and you can make many formulations. It's easy to make newer and newer formulations with medicines, but it's more difficult to introduce a new Ayurveda. Want to take Ayurveda side in, the biggest challenge is the we discover the properties of new herbs that are found. Once we identify these new, it becomes easier to combine in complex ways and make newer and newer herbs. Here is the criteria for acceptance of drug sources in Ayurveda. Like if you ask a plant accepted, means that you have to give information under all these headings. When you have understood all these about that plant, then you say that it will be accepted in Ayurveda. You can just take a moment in this. So as you can see, a nomenclature of names, crossing of names, nomenclature, we have to make sure that we have identified the. So in ancient days, plant was any name. When you look at a picture, you will find plant is referred by many names. It is quite a work. I have to tell the facts because of time people make things sound very easy when it comes to drugs. Sensitive, critical area because the drug is so. And it's a fact. And it's a fact that these plants can be harmful. And so we need to be very, very careful when we use it. So you can, this is the nomenclature and the identification. But we need to look at botanical features. We have to identify the plant in detail. We need to understand the botanical features. Take one species from the other. I will give examples of this very soon. And then there is the differential property of the parts of the plants. In every plant, the fruit may have a different property. Seeds may have different property. The leaves have a different property. May have different property. To understand of the whole, so the differential property, but also the property of the plants, parts of the. So Then we need to understand varieties. So two plants may look very similar, but one may be the variety of the other. And we can find that medicinal properties may be seen only in specific varieties. So I will give examples as we move forward. But identification is so important. And sometimes when one plant is not available, we are allowed to use substitutes. So around each plant, we need to compile information under all these headings, that you understand all the names of the plant, you understand their identification in terms of botanical features, properties of different parts of the plants, the varieties, related species, substitutes and adulterants, and then also the properties. When it comes to the properties, we need to study the physicochemical properties of the plants. Then we need to understand what will happen to the substance when it is consumed in the human body. So according to Ayurveda, the properties of the plants change when it comes into contact with the human system. When it is digested in the human body, its properties will change. So that is called as biotransformation. And then we need to understand how the plant actually works. What is the mechanism of action? Which organs does that particular plant target? Which organs will it work upon? And what is the risk-benefit analysis? In other words, what are the risks involved in taking the plant? Are there any chances of side effects? What are the benefits? All these things need to be understood. Then also we need to know interactions with other herbs. Will this plant interact with other herbs? Will it produce unwanted effects? So there can be antagonism. Sometimes this plant can synergize, have a good effect when you combine with another plant. Or sometimes when you combine with another plant, it will create a negative effect. Then we also need to understand interactions with foods. So, there's quite a lot of information that we need to compile about a plant before it will get accepted into the Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia. And then after we have understood these things, these three things, the nomenclature, the identification, and the properties, then we have to think of applications. And applications are usually done by combining. So first, the plants are classified into various groups in the Ayurvedic literature. There's so many groups into which plants are classified. And then they are targeted. They are grouped and targeted to focus on specific diseases. And then they are formulated in specific ways. We create balanced formulations and then need to study how they can be, whether it should be given decoction, whether they should be given as medicated powder or medicated water or oil. Come on the concept. And what dosage form should it be administered to the patient, to the oral, to the rectum, or etc. etc. The mode of administration and how to customize the formulation speak to an individual. So this is the overview. So when you have understood about all these aspects, you can keep this as a checklist. You want to know whether you can use a plant according to Ayurvedic principle, then you have to use this checklist. Do I know about codification? Yes. Cross-linking? Yes. Nature. Classification, descriptive, yes. Mechanical features, yes. Differential properties of parts, yes. Varieties, related species. If your answer is yes to all these points, the checklist that we have given here, then you can say, yes, now I can use in Ayurveda. If any one of your answer is no, or there is information not available, one or two of these, means Ayurveda cannot access use for medicinal. So this is the comprehensive methodology, the criteria Ayurveda. A lot of to be done in medicinal plants and other sources we can be. So now you might ask, what is like you studied plants mentioned in Ayurvedic texts? There are 1,000 plants. So how many to study one plant? Divide this, I mean, multiply 1,000 plants, you will realize that even our full lifetime is not enough to study even the plants that are mentioned in the Ayurvedic text. So not to mention about plants we are not yet studied. So we need to do a new plant and not detailed study of other plants, which represent, which can target the major combinations of the doshas, medicines that can be used in cleansing of the body. So we must have what you can call as an essential drug list, which exercise that you will have to do. Now, when I give you the list of plants, the next webinars on the dhatus and diseases, and you will get an idea whether these plants either have the original plant or an equivalent substitute that you might find in your place. So for a practitioner who is just beginning, I would say you must study 30 plants and as you keep advancing, you can study in detail and about 250 plants. So I wanted to give some real, this is something impossible. So we have to keep goals that you will study at least. So I would say after our webinar on this, so this is a very practical and to give you some practical guidelines as we complete the next 2 or 3 webinars and discuss about the pharmacology. We have to make an essential list. We'll have to make essential. The herbs that Ayurveda with names and 100 or 50, and then we can just do study detail and which ones to study non-detail, and then I can books which you can refer to get information about these medicinal plants. So we will have to move forward. But that's a plant is quite a lot of things. You have to look at so many parameters. So, hello, is what I discussed so far clear? Are you able to hear me? So now let us look at all these principles one by one. Here we are the property of different parts. So you can see, unfortunately, I don't know whether you have these plants, or I think only 10 is here today. I mean, which country, which place are you from? I think you mentioned once, but I don't know. So I just wonder whether what I'm saying can relate to it. So which place are you from? I just wanted to know whether you're familiar with plants. So I visited a plants here, antidysentery, in Sanskrit, and lotus, that you would be happy to coriander, lotus, and castor, but maybe seeds on the top. So antiryka, interesting thing is this is a herb, it's a shrub, and if this you use, you think you get in your location. So antidysentery have a different problem. So the bark are considered as different drug sources. Similarly, take lotus. The lotus, the flower has a different, the tuber has a different property, the seeds have a different property, and the stalk of locust has a different. Yes, yes. Which one are you not aware of? Yes, I thought so. The first one is probably very special to India. So it's a very good remedy for dysentery. The first plant. It's a very good remedy for dysentery. It also is very good for intestinal bleeding disorders. The first one. So for doctors in India, Hollerina antidysenterica is an indispensable herb. It's used in a wide variety of intestinal conditions, including amoebiasis. It's very effective for amoebiasis. And so you can see here there's one plant which you do not know, and we are going to encounter many such plants which you may not be familiar with. So you can already mark what could be the substitute which you could use in the UK. So this is how we have to think. So the other plants, the castor root is very much used. Are you aware of the use of castor root? Castor leaves are used in Ayurveda. The castor root is used. Leaves are also used. Leaves are very good for fermentation. And also the oil is used. And coriander, seeds have slightly different property and the leaves have slightly different property. So what I meant to say is that this is very, very important in understanding. We have to, when we start studying a medicinal plant, we must look at what are the different properties of the different parts of the plant. And then, I would like to get some response. You can look at these pictures and the names and tell me whether any of these plants you are familiar with or are they available in the UK. Are you familiar with any of these plants? Okay, so the first one is Eclipta alba, and according to Ayurveda, the other plant, which is yellow flowers, it's Vedalia chinensis. You can of course check the web and find out whether it's available in your place, but I cannot help it if these plants are not available there. And so these are known as Bhringaraja. These two plants are really very good for hair growth. They are antifungal, but there's a slight difference in the properties of the yellow flowered and the white flowered plant. So the next one is sandal. I hope, sandal is so well known, but there are three types of sandal mentioned in Ayurveda: the white sandal, the red sandal, and the yellow sandal. And these are actually three different species, but they are considered as three types of sandal because of some common properties or medicinal uses. So we need to know where to use white sandal, where to use red sandal, and where to use yellow sandal. And then we have Plumbago rosea. So sandal is very much used for pacifying pitta and for cooling the system. And yellow sandal or Berberis aristet is a very good skin tonic that improves the complexion of the skin. And then we have Plumbago species, Plumbago rosea and Plumbago zeylanica. And these are very strong, powerful medicines which can even destroy tumors in the body. Yes, you can check with them. So I would advise that you can, I will send by the next webinar, I will send a list of the herbs that are there in Ayurveda. So you can make a check and see how many herbs you will get there. And if you can give that feedback to me, then I can plan the webinar after that, incorporating those herbs, because otherwise if I tell plant names and plants which you will never obtain in your place, then the webinar will not be useful for you. So my idea is, in the last two webinars dealing with pharmacology, I want to introduce plants which you will get there, and also give some information how you can make simple formulations using those particular herbs. So it would be great to get feedback from uh, the participants when I circulate that list of medicinal plants. If you can just check out the ones which you are having, then we can, do a more meaningful webinar after this, because this, again, as I mentioned, is a very practical subject. So then we have substitutes. Here you can see there are again herbs, many of which we may know, some of which you may not be knowing, some of which may be available, some of which you cannot obtain there, but maybe through good herb sellers. So here you can see if there's no Aconitum heterophyllum is a herb. If you cannot get it, then you are allowed to use another herb called Cyprus rotundus. If you don't get cow's milk, then you can use goat's milk. If you don't get Nymphea stellata, then you can use Monocoria vaginalis. If you don't get Nymphea alba, then you can use Camphoria rotunda. If you don't get Berberis aristata, you can use. So there are some official substitutes mentioned. So this will also be a big challenge when you're engaging in your practice. You might find that some plants are not available, and then what can we do? And so Ayurveda says, in case a plant is not available, there's a substitute which can be used to get almost the same effect, if not exactly the same. And in non-critical conditions, you can use substitutes. So this listing and understanding is also very, very important. And then you have to be careful about adulterants. So especially if you are not collecting the plant yourself, or if the plant is coming through, vendors and third-party resellers, then you are likely to end up with a wrong herbs, and these adulterants can also be sometimes toxic and harmful. So you can see here there's a very important herb in Ayurveda called Saraka Ashoka. Ashoka is a herb which is used in disorders of the female reproductive system. This is a plant which can stop excessive menstrual bleeding. It's a good uterine tonic, and it's an important ingredient of many formulations, especially in gynecological diseases. But unfortunately, today this plant is not available in large numbers, and so the raw material, which is actually the bark, is often adulterated with the bark of another plant called Polyalthia longifolia, which is actually not having any of these properties. So another important plant is Devadaru, which is called a Cedrus deodara. This is a Himalayan pine tree, and it's got a very characteristic fragrance, and it's very important medicine to be used for the management of many illnesses, joint pains, congestion in the chest, and so on. And now commonly, because of the lack of availability, there's another plant which is used as an adulterant. And so if we are not careful about the source of our plants, then we are likely to end up with you will not get the desired results. So knowledge about adulterants is also very important. So when you study Ayurvedic pharmacology, we are alerted as to which are the plants which are commonly adulterated. So even if you're trying to get herbs from India, you have to be very, very careful about which are the plants that may get adulterated. And so you have to be extra careful and make sure that there's a proper identification done. So then we come to the physicochemical properties. So in Ayurveda, we say that physicochemical properties are represented by 20 gunas. I don't know whether you've heard about these 20 gunas. These are, continua of physicochemical Chemical Properties. Yes. So it's like a nominal scale. So we have Ushna or hot on one side and Shita or cold on the other side. And any drug that you take may be representing the degree of heat or cold on either side. And similarly, Ruksha and Snigdha, which is unctuousness, viscosity. So each herb may represent a certain point in this nominal scale. And when we study the physicochemical properties, we understand the properties of a drug in terms of where it stands in this range of opposite gunas. We will come to this a little bit more later, in a little bit more detailed discussion about the 20 gunas. But I wanted to mention this is how we understand physicochemical properties. So every plant that you study, you need to understand whether it's Ushna or Shita, whether it's cold in potency or whether it's hot in potency. So drugs which are cold in potency are usually, we can say, if you look at chemistry, they are producing endothermic reactions. And drugs which are hot are producing exothermic reactions, which means they release a lot of heat. They produce reactions in which a lot of heat is released. So in this way, we study the physicochemical properties of a plant. This is quite an elaborate process. We need to observe the effects of the plant for several years before we can understand its physicochemical properties. And the next thing that is assessed in Ayurveda, 6 tastes or rasas. So we have so one way when we know the properties of a herb, then we are able to, once we know the rasa or taste of a herb, we are able to understand its gunas, Shita and Snigdha. So if a substance has sweet taste, then it means it is likely to have these 2 gunas called Shita and Snigdha. If a herb has sour taste, then it is likely to be Snigdha and Ushna. If a herb has salty taste, then it is Ushna and Snigdha. If a herb has pungent taste, then it has got Ushna and Ruksha gunas. So the taste of a substance is an index to what are the physicochemical properties of that substance. So the rule is 70% of the time the taste or rasa can indicate the properties of a drug. 30% of times it may not. So there is a limit to the application of rasa in understanding the pharmacology of a drug, but in Ayurveda this is used as a preliminary indicator. And then we have to actually study the properties of a herb. And here is a formula which tells us how the properties of a drug can be studied. The rasa is the indicator of gunas in a substance, and guna means the hidden physicochemical configuration of a substance. So the guna is hidden, whereas the rasa is visible. And that's why if we are able to know the guna of a drug directly, then there is no need to rely on the rasa. Because the rasa is the most perceptible. When you taste a drug, you are able to feel only its taste. We are not able to understand its guna. So the guna is the hidden physicochemical configuration of a substance which we are able to understand only when the drug actually acts. Now virya of a drug means the gunas that initiate the pharmacological actions because of the virya that the drug acts. And vipaka means the physicochemical properties of the substance after digestion, after biotransformation. And karma is the final pharmacological activity of the substance. So when we take a herb, we might wonder how is this going to work on the body. So in order to understand how it will act in the body, we need to understand its physicochemical properties in terms of the 20 gunas. So we say, okay, this drug has a very sweet taste, so it is likely to be unctuous and cold, and then you administer it and you see that it does have properties that are increasing the body weight, that which specifies kapha. And when we confirm that this is the action, then we conclude that this substance has a sweet taste and also a cold potency and is unctuous. So, and it is the cold virya, the shita virya, which initiates a pharmacological action. So the net effect of taking such substances in your body would be that you would be able to pacify kapha but also increase body weight. So it might be helpful for people who have a very less kapha in their systems, or in whom the kapha is undergoing depletion. But it may not be good for persons in whom kapha is already aggravated. And so in this way, we can study and understand each and every drug that is mentioned in the Ayurvedic text. So it's very helpful to prepare and keep a table of the properties of the drugs. So the net effect of all these parameters is what creates the final pharmacological activity of the substance. And that is understood by actual observation. So we can see that we have partially predictive pharmacology and partially experimental pharmacology. Some on the basis of certain other properties, and they're verified through actual experimentation or actual observation. So this is how the knowledge of pharmacology has developed in Ayurveda. So next we have biotransformation. So according to Ayurveda, the properties of the medicines we consume will after digestion. So that the role, how it modifies properties of medicinal substances is very, very crucial. So ginger is pungent in taste, becomes sweet after digestion. Pepper is also pungent, but this doesn't change digestion. According to Ayurveda, what's the difference between ginger and pepper? We would say that ginger and pepper are hot and pungent, but after digestion, ginger becomes sweet. So it will elevate that pitta, as pepper is pungent even after digestion, pitta strongly, whereas ginger will not, even though there's any other properties in common. The way they are digested and what happens to the digestion completely changes the way they affect the human body. So this is called biotransformation, and this is called as vipaka. So to summarize, again, saying that I try to study and understand the property utility of one by looking at the plant. Using some rules, we make a judgment as what properties. If it's sweet taste, may these properties. If it is sour, these properties. And then based on assumptions, we actually know the action of and conclude if it has on the human body. So this is about bio. And now we go for pharmacology study. What type of action does it do? So drug can do lekha, a drug can do pachana or digesting, a drug can do some setting, a drug can do healing. So pharmacological actions have been described in the Ayurvedic texts known as Charaka Samhita. So this text, every plant, there is specific pharmacological actions in the human body. Depending on these actions, specific healing is used. So I've just listed 5 actions, but we in Ayurvedic text is 50 clear-cut pharmacological action described for this groups of herbs. So this is how step we build up the knowledge of Ayurvedic pharmacology, study nomenclature, identity in terms of varieties, the properties of different parts of the plant, substitutes, adulterants, study individual properties of each. What do Basa, Parker, and then finally, what drug is action the body. It's really a target for substance. It's also very important that the drugs very specific sides effect. Again, we have some herbs, 3 herbs. I don't know whether these are for these important clinical the practice of Ayurveda. So the first one is Alpiniaca, which is called sometimes in Ayurveda as Rasna. And this herb actually works locations which kapha emanate in the body, which means head and the joint. So it's mainly in medicines working on diseases of head, in chest and is involved in kapha. The herb can target because the joints is the location of vata, and it can also be used in diseases in the chest as well as head because these are also vata. That is what targeting to specific organ. And then we have another herb which is Tribulus terrestris, and this works in the urinary system and reproductive organs. So we see it in formulations which are targeting the urinary system or the reproductive organs. Even by looking at some of the main ingredients, we're able to therefore understand which part of the body this medicine is likely to work of targeting. So knowledge is important, you know, that herb can fit into the normal sphere of the system. And we have Arjuna or Terminalia Arjuna, which is supposed to work specifically on the heart. And this is a very well herb, and there are medications made out of this tree which are targeting cardiac problems. So the exact mechanism of action of Terminalia Arjuna is not well known, but it's believed that it might be the heart muscle to recover and regain its studies are still in the early stage. So this is about target. So there are many such which have very specific targets in the human body, specific areas, specific locations, specific organs, specific systems. It's very different for different herbs. So it is not only important to understand what dosha the herb might work or what dhatu the herb might work, will increase it in me, but we also need to understand, patients and herb that we study. So that's about targeting, and then we go to the benefit analysis. Many people think that Ayurvedic medicine is safe. So drug, according to Ayurveda, has some good and bad. There is nothing in the without faults or without any good about it. Everything of the bad. So there are people much of can increase your white. By the way, you heard of ashwagandha? Same system. People are then it's a lot of us be very dangerous because if ashwagandha is used excessively, it increases pitta and heat and other problems bleeding. So when we use gantha, which in another one, Tanias, so you use a lot of and also another term, is shatavari. Yes, it would hurt, but the thing is, if you overuse ashwagandha, increase your pitta, and it can also induce bleeding in some people. Ashwagandha milk and also shatavari. If you drink ashwagandha along with milk and shatavari, then it becomes more safer and will not cause as much problems. So that is say, just because something is good, more of cannot be good. Also, harikaki is another herb which is very, very important in Ayurveda. And if you use too much harikaki, it can cause drain your system to give to the herbs like harikaki, ashwagandha, and tend to be careful with it. Yes, we need to be careful with some of these herbs long term. So then we have three which can cause between I realize one of those drugs so much why I use in as a where the other person takes some and triple I to be confused. It's not good. If you take triple I only for hours, then eventually excessive dryness to come up in your stomach. Even ears may get loaded and damaged, may be overused. So herbs, these three formulations, single formulation, because it to create this popularly, people have realized that even that can cause effect. Medicine is we have to use them in moderation. So there may be for people with people may be more harmful in a person who has a prakriti, harmful in a person who. So this is the benefit of herbs. And so then we go on to the next point. So what I would say is that for each and plant, we have to do the risk-benefit analysis. After we study individual physicochemical properties, we must do a risk-benefit analysis, and then only accept it. And next, we have to study with other herbs. So whether every relation of plants or other substances, and these relationships are known as enemy, neutral, or friend. So every herb has a friend. If you use that herb with a friend herb, so that the friend will boost the action of the main plant that we have chosen. And ashwagandha and shatavari, they balance out each other. Then the strong plant is neutralized and balanced by the other plant. So this is when becomes an enemy or has an acidic action. Then it can completely cancel the action of the other. So we have and Ativisha, where one augments the other, and Ashwagandha and Shatavari, where one balances the other. And if you take another herb called Bhalka, which is Semicarpus anacardium, this is a very powerful herb in Ayurveda, Semicarpus anacardium. And then Vibhigati, which is Terminalia bellerica. So if you take these two herbs, they are opposite to each other. If you one with the other, one will cancel the effects of the others. So in Ayurveda, there are a very clear understanding of friend, enemy, and neutral, which plants can be used together to augment the effects of the main plant, or which plant can be used without actually, producing unwanted effects. So this is where to combine plants, in which way, when to use a friend, when to use an enemy, when to use a neutral herb. All this is part of the Ayurvedic understanding of pharmacology. Interactions with herbs make up a very, very important component of study of Ayurvedic pharmacology. So friend, enemy, and neutral. Some plants are friends with each other, some plants are enemies of each other, and some plants are neutral to each other. So we need to really thoroughly understand and the relationship of plants with each other, which are the ones that are friends, which are the ones that are neutral, and which are the ones that are enemies. So I can have a pause, a break for about. So we the other parameters now which we need to study to understand use a herb. We have studied drug interacts. Then we have to drug interacts. So now you can see that plants and drugs also interact with food. So a drug might turn out to be harmful in many ways, that you are combining it with the wrong herbs, or you're combining it with the wrong food. So we need to know there's a substance called mineral pitch, which is actually Shilajatu in Sanskrit. I don't know whether you've heard about Shilajatu. So Shilajatu is obtained from rocks. It's an exudate from the rocks. It's a mineral substance. It's a very good rejuvenative and a rasayana. So if you are using horse gram as a food along with Shilajatu, then it will destroy the effects of Shilajatu. Shilajatu will not work on your body if you take horse gram along with it. And when you are using a plant called Gugulu is a very important plant in Ayurveda. It is from a gum from the plant known as Commiphora whitei. So you can make a note of these plants and try to analyze and understand whether these plants are available in your own region. So if you use curds when you're using Gugulu, then it can produce allergic reactions. On the other hand, if you add pepper when you are taking turmeric, then the absorption of turmeric will be enhanced very much. So more of turmeric will be absorbed in the system if you add pepper along with it. So in this way, we need to study and understand how the various herbs or drugs that we are using will actually interact with other herbs and other foods. So without this knowledge, we are not allowed to use any herb. So this is another important exercise to be done before we can start using medicinal plants or other substances in Ayurveda. So next we come to classification of drugs. So with this previous slide, we have completed 3 important steps in the study of a plant, which is nomenclature, identification, and then properties. So once we have finished these three stages, then we go to its actual application in clinical practice. And so this application, we will look at the various principles of application. The first important part is the classification of drugs. So before we can combine and formulate the drugs, we need to classify them. So this classification is done on the basis of potency. So we classify all hot drugs into one group, and then we classify all the cold drugs into another group. And then based on the taste, we classify the drugs into 6 groups. So all the sweet drugs together, all the sour drugs together, all the salty drugs together, all the pungent drugs together, all the bitter drugs together, and all the astringent drugs together. So this is what you can also do with the herbs that are found around your location. You can pick up the herbs and you must put them into these bins. Which are the hot ones, which are the cold ones, which are the sweet ones, which are the sour ones. And then based on the pharmacology, we classify them into Jivaniya, Brahmaniya. These are Sanskrit words, but I'll briefly explain what they mean. There are some herbs which are nourishing, some herbs which add to your body weight, which which have high calorific value. And there are drugs which can do scraping action. It can remove unwanted waste from your system. And there are drugs which can cause loosen and remove the system through loose bowels. They are called Bhedaniya. There are herbs which can heal, which can join tissues. And there are herbs which stimulate digestion. They are called as Deepa herbs. And so then there are drugs which increase the strength of the body, which is Bala. And then there are drugs which improve the complexion of the body, which is Varna. And then there are drugs which improve the voice, drugs which are specific for the heart. And there are many other such pharmacological actions that are described. So in Ayurveda, we classify all the herbs depending on what actions they do. So this is like a classification table. So all the herbs that you find in your place, you must classify. So without this classification, it will be difficult to pick up a herb when you need to use it in a specific context. So apart from the pharmacological action, herbs are also classified into the gunas which they represent. So there are some drugs which have ruksha or a drying property, some drugs which have a guru or heavy property, some which are lakhu. So depending on the 20 gunas which they predominate in, drugs are also again classified. So these classifications may overlap. For example, the drug that you would find in a guru classification would also probably come in the cold classification and also in the rasas or in the specific 6 tastes. So these kind of classifications are overlapping, but these classifications are necessary for you to be able to identify and choose a particular drug in a particular context. So then we have it's not Deepaka, there's a spelling mistake, it's actually Vipaka. And Vipaka actually means the post-digestive taste. So it's not possible for us to identify the post-digestive taste, but this is inferred, this is an inference. And according to some schools, there are only 2 post-digestive tastes, lakhu or heavy, a transformation of the herb which causes the body to lose weight, or a transformation which causes the body to gain weight. So these are called as guru and lakhu vipakas. or biotransformation into Guru and Lakhu states. And then we also have classifications based on specific action on the doshas. So we have drugs which work on Vata, drugs which work on Pitta, drugs which work on Kapha, drugs which work on Vata Pitta, Pitta Vata, Pitta Kapha, Kapha Pitta, Vata Kapha, Kapha Vata, and all the three doshas. So these are also, classification based on action on the doshas. So in this way, the drugs are classified very comprehensively, based on potency, on taste, on pharmacology, on gunas, on vipaka, and on dosha karma. So once you have these classifications in place, then it's possible for us to pick up the right of herbs and formulate them in the right manner and then apply it in an individual patient. So now we will try to understand the principles of how to formulate a drug. How do we make a balanced formulation? So when you say a formulation, it's all about multiple ingredients performing different functions. So in the Ayurvedic texts is given the imagery of the king and the courtiers. Every ingredient has every formulation has what you can call the major and minor ingredients. There's a king and then his courtiers, the assistants. So the major ingredient is supported by the minor ingredients, and the taste makers make it palatable and easy to consume. So a formulation is a combination of three categories of ingredients: the major ingredients, the minor ingredients, and then the taste makers. So just like a king works with all his courtiers, with all the people in his kingdom or in his court, in a similar way, the physician assembles different ingredients to create a formulation. It is like an army that is sent into the human body to attack and bring down the disease. So this is the very interesting, metaphor that is used in the Ayurvedic texts to explain how drugs can act. So to summarize again, we need to first of all classify the herbs into the various categories that we discussed. And once the classification is done, then we have to start building a formulation. And this formulation is done by bringing multiple ingredients together under the three categories of major and minor ingredients and the taste makers. And this is done in such a way that the major ingredient works like a king and the rest of it are like the supportive courtiers. So when you take a formulation, if you want to study an Ayurvedic formulation, it's really very important for us to be able to develop the skill. So this is about the principle of formulating drugs. And then I want to talk about how Ayurveda makes some very simple combinations, basic principles. So here we have two formulations which have very similar ingredients. So again, I am sorry for some of the Sanskrit names. These medicines are known as Amritottaram Kashayam and Vyakriyadi Kashayam. So these are two decoctions, which means they are herbs boiled in water. They are water extracts of herbs. And these herbs in the first decoction consist of dry ginger, Tinospora cordifolia, and Terminalia chebula. Second ingredient formulation has also dry ginger, Tinospora cordifolia, and Solanum indicum. So only one plant changes. So you can see in the first formulation, Terminalia chebula is the king. And in the second formulation, Solanum indicum is the king. So The other two ingredients are actually the minor or supportive ingredients, that is dry ginger and Tinospora cordifolia. Whereas Terminalia cebula, which is Haritaki, and then Solanum indicum, these are actually the major ingredients, or which says the king. So by changing the major ingredient, the action of this formulation changes vastly. So if you look at dry ginger, this works on your alimentary tract, and Terminalia cebula and Solanum indicum work on the channels, and Tinospora cordifolia works on the tissue. So this is how. So actually, if you take Terminalia cebula, it works on the whole body, whereas Solanum indicum has a specific action on the lungs. So the first is to remove ama, to cook and remove the ama from the whole body, whereas the second formulation is used to remove ama from especially the chest, the respiratory system. So we can understand here how just by the change of one ingredient, the whole target and location of action of the herb completely changes. So this is the secret of formulations. And good physicians are able to make simple combinations like this. We would never give in Ayurveda dry ginger alone, or Tinospora alone, or Terminalia cebula alone. They're always used in combinations. So the simplest combinations consist of at least 3 ingredients, because 3 means more balance, the plus, the minus, and the balance. So at least you need 3 ingredients to bring out a simple balanced formulation. Less than that would mean that the drug have not been adequately balanced. Although in rare cases, even an Ayurveda might use only a combination of 2 herbs. This is again an example of a very simple formulation. I don't know whether you have heard of these formulations. Okay. So then we move on. So here are the pictures. You can see plants that ingredient of the 2 formulations that I was talking about. One is known as Amritotaram, and the other is known as Vyagriyadi. And you can see there's just the second ingredient which is different in both, and the third ingredient and the first ingredient are the same. Here is a slide which gives you the pictures, maybe using these pictures. I'm sure you must be knowing ginger, and you might also be knowing haritaki, and I'm not sure about Tinospora cordifolia. And so the first plant, as I mentioned, is Tinospora. The second is Terminalia cebula. And the third is, of course, ginger, dry ginger. So this is how formulations are made. And now we have another ingredient, which is a ghee. This is actually used in Ayurveda as an immune regulator. So this has been found extremely effective in enhancing immunity, even in small children, people who get very frequent respiratory infections, and who get respiratory allergies and cough, and also in conditions like even AIDS. In this particular medicine has been to enhance immunity by increasing the CDC counts. It's a very good rejuvenative for recovery from illnesses. And this contains a few ingredients. One is Holoptilia integrifolia and Cedrus deodara, and then the 10 roots, the Shamula, and then Panchakola, which are the 5 pungents. So 15, 16, 17, 18. There are 19 ingredients. So this is a little bit more complex formulation. It has 19 ingredients. And Here you can see the different ingredients, how they act on different aspects of the body. Holoptilia integrifolia is known as chiravilva, and it acts on the koshta or the alimentary tract and corrects the digestive fire. So the second plant, the Cedrus deodorata, can remove the blockage caused by kapha. And Dashamula digests the ama all over the body and cleanses the channels. And Panchakola aids in digestion, assimilation and metabolism. And milk and ghee gives the nourishment to the tissues and enhances it. So here is a formulation which corrects your digestion, which opens the channels, which enables transformation. It's just by allowing the dhatus to be properly formed. It's not directly giving any nourishment to the immune system. What it does is correct the digestion and metabolism in the body and thereby enhance the natural immunity of the system. Most of the Ayurvedic herbs work in that way. Now, if you look at the ingredients, you will not find any direct immunostimulant, or there's no substance in it which is directly going to act on the immune system. But this is a drug which indirectly works. The whole focus is on how to enhance your inbuilt immunity, not to give us from the outside. So Indutam actually means the glow like a moon. So it is said that a person's face will glow like a moon. When a person becomes really, you know, energy level, and then comes we look at. It's the meaning of the word. Now, another formulation which is called Dashamula. Dashamulam is a really very, very important herbal formulation in Ayurveda. So it would be worth checking whether these herbs are available in parts outside. So Dashamula means the 10 roots. So in this we use the roots of 10 trees and root of 10 shrubs. So this group is again subdivided into two. We have the bigger group of 5 roots. And then also the smaller group of 5 roots. So the bigger group of 5 roots consist of Aegle marmelos, Melina arborea, Primna latifolia, Stereospermum saviolens, Oroxylum indicum. And the smaller group of 5 roots consist of Solanum indicum, Solanum xanthocarpum, Desmodium gangeticum, Pseudarthria viscida, and Tribulus terrestris. So bigger and smaller groups of 5 roots together make up the bigger group of 10 roots, which is called as Dashamula. So this combination is said to remove edema from the body. It causes digestion of ama and cleanses, especially the microchannels. Like if you want to improve microcirculation in the human body, then this is a very powerful ingredient. It becomes a common ingredient in many formulations in Ayurveda, this Dashamulam, which is why I'm introducing it. And Indukandam is one of the examples of a formulation in which Dashamulam is used to enhance circulation in the microchannels of the body. So when the microchannel circulation improves, the biotransformations in the body happen more spontaneously, the tissues are well formed, and so naturally immunity is increased without putting any artificial immunostimulant agents. These drugs help the body itself to recover the innate immunity. So here you can see the 2 herbs, which is dry. One is the bigger group of herbs is hot in potency, and the smaller group of 5 roots is hot nor cold. And the 3 doshas. So together, the formulation is slightly on the hot side, and it causes a good waste removal. So the shamulam cannot be used when the body is accumulated with too much of waste. It doesn't work. So it's after the first cleansing is over, and when there are minor wastes remaining in the body, then you can use the shamulam, and that will remove the microchannels of the system. So this is a very important ingredient, and it would be worth checking whether how many of these plants are available in the region where you are working. So here is the plants, the bigger group of roots, and they remove micro waste, cleanse the micro channels, and improve microlation. So on one side we can see the bigger group of roots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here we have. So here is the second 5 roots. These the smaller group of roots are actually made of herbs and small shrubs, whereas the bigger group are from trees. So the only challenge here is that the roots are being used, so this is a bit destructive on the plant. And today, when we are manufacturing Ayurvedic herbs at industrial scale, then this turns out to be a big challenge to get availability of these herbs. So sometimes in actual practice, the stem plants are used instead of the roots, especially for the trees, because it takes many, many years for the trees to grow, and then to completely destroy them and take the roots alone is not really very, very helpful. So this is the bigger and smaller group of roots. Together they make the group of 10 roots. And then now I would like to talk about in the next section the difference between Ayurvedic and modern pharmacology. Because in the next lecture we will be looking at actual practical examples of what are the herbs, how to make formulations, how to study individual herbs. We will study some individual herbs and look at more formulations. And then we will go on to preparations, different types of preparations of Ayurvedic medicines, dosage, and where they are indicated in the next the 2 remaining classes after that. But now, yes, and now what we will look at is some theoretical impressions on what makes Ayurvedic pharmacology different from that of modern medicine. And this is also important to understand. So here is the modern approach. When we try to study Ayurveda through the modern pharmacological approach, we follow an extremely reductionist set framework. So formulation ingredients, they are simplified few ingredients. So in Ayurveda, there are complex system of combinatorics and pharmaceutical processes. And chemically, these are very complex mixtures of molecules. So if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, it's not one molecule. It's not 10 molecules. It's sometimes hundreds of molecules. So Ayurvedic medicines, therefore, are chemically more complex. Modern medicines are chemically more simple. To nearly hundreds of herbs. So most research in Ayurveda drug always focused on action. So this is example is the soap story of terpene, recovered from plant called. So this plant actually called discovered that terpene. Found that terpene was useful in control, and but very soon it was that this drug has so many sides. Terpene had to be banned. Today it is used only for conducting studies. It's only used as a drug for research. Now, Wolfia serpentina is by the immunity herb have the problems that we reserve. The bottom line, isolate the active principles and separate them from the plant. We will not get a balanced stack. Discussed all these wild and then combine them in a to produce a proper medicine. In modern medicine, we break it down and isolate one kill. So these methods are actually going in opposite direction. So between modern approach, they are going in opposite directions. Start with ingredient, and you see how to upward single ingredients come simple formulations, simple become complex formulations, complex formulations, superficial. So now complex and formulations, and very rare single ingredients are used, but they are not an approach. So from single ingredients and from the phytochemicals separates, and then we end up single molecule. So these two approaches each other. So it is very unwise to ask today when we try to talk about drugs in Ayurveda. And ask, please tell us how your drug works, the active. So therefore, tell what is that single molecule that works. It's a group of many molecules that work. They need to work in a balanced way, which we are combining these ingredients together. So this is essentially the difference between the modern and the approach of understanding pharmacology. So here you can see it's a little bit of a busy slide, but it differentiates which is called as pharmacology with so you do have trying to them on target, and about 200, and then go to the next, which is identification and optimization. How to put in vivo candidate molecules. This development phase, next phase, preclinical study, maybe 5 months, and then becomes one molecule, and one molecule clinical study phase 1 to 4 gets regulatory approval, and it becomes a drug in the market. So you can see 10,000 molecules, how it gets reduced to just a single molecule. That the medicine start the actual clinical experience. So this is the experience where it's in humans, and you see the clinical observation, and then you can look at the efficacy in vivo, in vitro studies, and we understand the molecular mechanism. Here we need to understand how multiple ingredients work together. That's a real difference in modern pharmacology and Ayurveda. Conventional, it is producing 10,000 molecules, you eliminate, end up with one molecule. Whereas in Ayurveda, we start with 1,000 molecules, and we also end with 1,000 molecules. And we as molecules interact with each other and create a balanced effect. So here is a drug discovery space. Much work is going on today. In medicine, people have to stand. There's a real challenge before oncologists on how to improve the drug discovery. This universe, if you look at 10 raised to 60 small molecules in the chemical universe, 2,100,000 molecules are available for commerce, and about 70,008 have been for drugs, and only 140 have been. So you can see earlier we started with a slide in which we said 10,000 Ayurveda uses, and so here you see molecules in the universe, and 1,050 are approved drugs. So there's a lot of validation done for drugs. Ayurveda focuses on complex interactions between molecules, whereas in Ayurvedic medicine, they focused on just. So here again, you can see 2,020 targets, out of which 364 have been successful, are still in clinical trials, and 44 have been discontinued. 1,331 are still research. So after doing all this work, the harvest in terms of molecule really effective is quite helpful. Only about 350 molecules that have been found to be successful, and these molecules also on long-term use turn out to have side effects, and then we have to discuss them, and then back to square it. So this method of drug discovery in modern medicine. So I'm telling these differences because now before we go to next webinars, which will follow the Ayurveda and preparation of medicines, for us to know this contrast, what pharmacology and pharmaceutical from that of the convention. That we move on to expectations. So today there is a new method which network pharmacology. So in modern medicine, they say that one molecule acts on one target. Where in Ayurveda, many molecules act on many targets. So this network pharmacology mapping is explaining the drug target this pharmacology network. So this shows how I just wanted to let understand that there's a bit of complex Ayurvedic relations. So don't have to get overwhelmed by its complexity. But to know that, so know that our medicines are working in complex ways, and that different ingredients are really important to bring out the best, and they work together in great harmony to bring about the particular changes in this. It's important to appreciate this models which explain how this pharmacology works. Here you can see the example of one herb, Triphala. how its action can be multifaceted. You can use Triphala with sugar, with rock salt, with black ash, with oil, ghee. Use it with hot water, with ghee and honey, with ghee, with powder as a decoction, as a face pack. So multiple ways in use Triphala. I'm sure you've heard of Triphala, which is such a common and popular herbal formulation used in Ayurveda. So when you look at Triphala, you can see the ways in which it is used. And all of these produce different pharmacological actions. So you can see when you use it with sugar, it's helpful in acid peptic disease. When you use it with water, it becomes laxative. When you use it with honey, it can be used in kapha diseases. When you use it with ghee, it's heart diseases. With rock, it becomes helpful in vata diseases. As a powder in sensitive gums. And with black ash, as a black ash, it's helpful in asthma. As a decoction, it's helpful in liver diseases. And oil, it's helpful in non-heal ulcers. Helpful in ghee and honey, helpful in improving eyesight. So this is the multidimensional effect of Triphala, one drug, one combination, depending on the way we use it, depending on the dosage form, depending on the target. This one drug, Triphala, produces multifarious effects on the system. So all Ayurvedic drugs are like this. They are working in a multi-dimensional manner. So it's this, while we initially feel complex and confusing, what used to, then we will understand and apply the knowledge of Ayurveda effectively. This is one important example of how to so many words depending on how we use it. And I want to again give warning, you're abusing Triphala. A lot of people take too much of Triphala every day, and the problem is Triphala got great dryness in the system. Your alimentary intestines, if you're careful, erosion of the mucous film in your stomach. And I have seen patients, their US revealing there are patches of mucosa which have been lost from the intestines because of the Triphala. So that's about Triphala. And next is the important aspect. Next few slides about the philosophy behind the Ayurvedic approach to pharmacology. This again in preparation for our next 3 years. We should be more dealing with practical aspects of pharmacy and pharmacology, how to combine them, and then how to process them, and how to administer them when I come in our future webinar. So before we go into that, it's really very important to look at some more philosophical concepts behind Ayurvedic pharmacology. So we can say when you're entering from modern pharmacology to Ayurveda, it's like you're shifting from molecule to molecule. If you want to use a modern industry terminology to describe what are Ayurvedic medicines, that you can call Ayurvedic medicines as molecular cocktails of complex molecules. Innumerable that if you really start listing the molecules and trying to see them individually, it's mind-boggling. It's so complex. We would have thought modern medicine has so much of sophisticated equipments, but they are all designed for separation, for breaking things into pieces. So even equipments are unable to understand the complexity of Ayurvedic medicines, which are based on combinations. of complex molecules. So the focus is in Ayurveda isolation of molecules, but understanding the complexity of molecular combinations. So molecular cocktails are prepared by combining molecules, and we're able to combine molecules only when we have a very clear understanding of molecules interact. In other words, understand molecular interaction in like this term when we bring to the modern world of science, it's language to use, say that C details, not simply, mumbo jumbo, actually very, very complex molecular cocktails. So now we see molecular combinations. So as I was mentioning, when we look at it from the Ayurvedic viewpoint, we are talking about not single molecule for a single target, but multiple molecules for multiple targets. So why does Ayurveda use these complex molecules? We thought that Ayurveda had to use such complex formulations because the modern methods of isolation of individual molecules was not available then. Probably that is what they had to use. So up to now it was thought that the modern methods are more advanced and the old method of herbs, because of the limitation of technology available at the time. If you really look at it deeply, it's not the case. It's the philosophy that we believe if you want to work on the body, we need to target them, target the body, in a very balanced manner. That you to work on multiple targets at the same time and not just on one target. So Ayurveda has chosen to combine herbs and make these complex formulations, not because it is not able to, not just because it was not able to isolate the molecules, but this emphasis is there because if you want to balance the human body, we need to work on multiple targets at the same time. And working on multiple targets at the same time, it's not possible to do this with a single molecule. You need a complete combination, a complex combination of multiple molecules to be able to do this. So that's the reason why molecular combinatorics became the basis. So I'm introducing two terms here to explain Ayurvedic pharmacology in a modern language. One is that Ayurvedic medicines are molecular cocktails, and that the technology that we use to make these molecular cocktails, we can call that as molecular combinatorics. So this is the very important philosophical background to understanding Ayurvedic pharmacology. So today I want to give some examples of how we can study. This might be helpful for us. It's only in this webinar that I want to give some scientific information. This might be too complex to go into greater detail, but it's beginning increasingly more possible nowadays to study how molecules interact with each other. So there are techniques called as isobolograms, which is multiple ingredients interact with each other. It's now increasingly realized that when drugs are given in combination, they are able to produce effects that are greater than or less than the effect predicted from their individual potential. So this is well understood. If you give molecules together, and if you give just one molecule independently, then it's now possible to understand what's the difference. So drug combinations, study of drug combinations are becoming more common. And it tells the life additivity. So this shows whether when you combine two chemicals, whether the action of one of the chemicals is increased or decreased If there's synergism, then the activity of the first ingredient is enhanced. If there is antagonism, then the activity of the ingredient is reduced. So in this way, we are able to sometimes, the benefits of such combination studies. You might ask, why do we want to use these combinations? Because even in modern medicine, such studies are helpful. Like, for example, there's the medicine called phenytoin, or commonly known as eptoin, which is used for management of seizures. And this eptoin, when the seizures are really very severe, you need to administer this medicine in very high doses. And at higher the more the side effects. So actually there's a herb in Ayurveda called Negundo. If you take Negundo to when you give phenytoin, it has been found that it provides effect at half the dosage, which means now you can just add 50% of the drug and you get the result of 100% just because you added a herb to it. So which means when you are able to reduce the effective dosage of the main drug, then the side effects are reduced. This is how Vedic medicine is now by combining. So when the combination is made very carefully, then the side effects of the main ingredient is reduced and still the effect is normalized. So this is again another principle behind molecular compounds. So here is a very, I have now some examples of such molecules data, so that so this I think in a webinar repeat is one of the best known examples of effective combinations. Like if you curcumin and pepper, or if you take turmeric along with pepper, then in humans, after a dose of 2 grams of curcumin, if you give 2 grams of curcumin alone to human beings, then you will not see even a little curcumin in your blood. It's so undetectable, or it's extremely low. But if you add 20 mg of piperine, which is from pepper, and then you will find that the increase in bioavailability was 2000%. Curcumin suddenly becomes detectable in the blood. So when you added a little piperine, curcumin was more readily absorbed into the blood. So this is the importance of a combination. And this is again a demonstration of why Ayurveda prefers to use drugs as combinations and not as single ingredients. Now here is another herb called Hydastis canadensis. So this is also known as a golden seal. I don't know, have you heard of the golden seal? Yes. So this is a very interesting herb, and this is not an Ayurvedic herb. The flower synergies are present at higher concentration, extracts from the leaves, and the antimicrobial berberine is present in the roots. So if we use only the roots or only the leaves, then we don't get an ideal effect. So golden seal, if you want to get a good effect, you must use both the roots and leaves together. So if you use both roots and leaves together, then it has a much more optimal activity against Staphylococcus aureus. And so again, an example of this. So I want to also demonstrate in my remaining slides here as to how the study of drug combinations is very much possible. Already so many examples. So we can study it also from Ayurvedic theory, but we can also study it using modern pharmacological tools as is becoming increasingly, demonstrated. So next we have licorice. I'm sure you must have also heard of licorice. which is a very interesting herb. It's widely used as a mineralocorticoid inside this herb. And so licorice, if you take a crude extract of licorice, it inhibits. Yes, exactly. So it's good for the throat, and it's used for many. It's a good anti-inflammatory agent. It's in high doses. It's an emetic, and it clears your voice. Now here what we find is if you take crude extract of licorice, it inhibits and means the formation of new blood vessels. It can stop the formation of new vessels. But if you remove the active compounds from licorice, then it will enhance angiogenesis. This is the opposite effect. If you use the whole plant, it reduces effect. Use the chemicals inside that active ingredient produces. Now the results can be really very, for example, in cancer cells propagate themselves. They become stronger through the process of angiogenesis. So if you suppress, we can suppress the growth of cells. So licorice can help prevent the spread of cancer or the growth of cancer. Whereas if you give the active chemicals in licorice, it will increase the growth of cancer. So here's again an example of crude versus isolated extracts use extremely side effects. Another example, common ghee actually see the paper really explained. So turmeric that for turmeric has not got curcumin. It's also got alkaloid. For a alkaloid in turmeric, it's nerve cells. An alkaloid in turmeric can stimulate nerve cells, and this is fat soluble. So an exciting new study published in the journal Stem Cell Research and Therapy shows that curcumin alone is not enough to explain the healing power of turmeric as a whole plant. The study found that a fat-soluble component within turmeric may make it a promising candidate for regeneration in neurological diseases. So if you want to use turmeric in neurological diseases, then you need to give turmeric along with ghee. And so giving turmeric along with ghee is a practice in Ayurveda, and now we can see the reason behind it. And if you use turmeric in ghee, if you use turmeric with pepper, you have one effect. If you use turmeric with ghee, you have another effect. So here's again a demonstration of how drug combinations can make a big difference. And now there's another plant, Rhizoma cordialis and Rhizocumae. So Chinese medicinal plants, and they found that isoborogram and combination index analysis were used to evaluate the synergistic effect of these two plants, and the results indicated that if you use the two herbs together, then there is a very strong effect on cancer. But if we use them independently, that they don't produce this effect. So only when we combine the two herbs, it shows the anti-cancer efficacy. So here's again a very interesting example of why we have to combine two herbs together. So I hope this is becoming more and more clear, which is why in Ayurveda, we always talk about combinations, that without combining, the effects will not be balanced. So these were some of the examples which I wanted to show to bring about the philosophy of pharmacology in Ayurveda. How from individual herbs we go to drug combinations, and how through these combinations we produce a balanced effect on the human body. And this is called as the science of Dravya Guna. Dravya means substance and Guna means property. So Dravya is the substance which we use as medicine, and Guna is the property based on understanding of which we predict the activity of the Dravya. So Ayurveda is also defined as the science that gives you the knowledge about Dravyas, Gunas and Karmas. Dravya means substances, Guna means properties, and Karmas mean actions or activity. So Ayurveda tries to tell us what substances are helpful for human life, what substances are harmful for human life, what actions are supportive of life, what actions are antagonistic to life. And so how do we make substances more wholesome, more helpful for the human body? So that is the basis for the Ayurvedic science of pharmacology. So now how do we understand actions of drugs? Drug action cannot always be understood by the guna or property. Sometimes the actions are understood by guna, which means like if you have a drug and you know that it has got a certain property, then you can predict how it will work. But sometimes there's something special in that substance which makes it to act. You may not be able to understand exactly how and why it acts, and sometimes you're able to partly understand. So Ayurveda leaves this actually very open. Ayurveda says that drug action can be sometimes fully understood, sometimes not understood, and sometimes partly understood. So even the combinations, we may not be able to fully understand their exact mechanism, but we need to look at the substance as a whole, and we need to look at actual clinical outcomes to decide whether a particular combination is useful or not. And this is why tradition is so important. All this knowledge has taken thousands of years to observe and compile. If you were to start on a blank slate, then it would take many, many more centuries before we would be able to catch up with the knowledge that is already provided to us through the tradition. And so we cannot afford to lose this information that is there in the codified texts. So that's come out of, much labor across the centuries. And that's why we are able to apply Ayurveda today, because they worked out all these possibilities and understood through experiment, through observation, through logic, and through actual application, how these herbs interact with each other and create a balanced action. So in Ayurveda, when we talk about drug action, we say that there are many aspects that we need to understand. So this is spelled out in the slide. What does medicine do in the body? What will be the final effect of the medicine when you administer it? That effect is called as karma or activity. And what causes the medicine to act in that way is called as virya or potency. So for every herb, we need to understand these elements. What action will it do? How does it act? Through what agency does it act? Where does it act? That is called as adhikarana or substratum. What is the time taken to act? This is called as the kala, or the time taken for that drug to act. How long will it take for the medicine to act? What is the mechanism of action? How does it act? And then what is the final outcome? That is the efficacy of the medicine. So the activity of the medicine and the efficacy of the medicine are different. The activity is the pharmacological action of the herb. But because of that activity, the ultimate result would be, for example, if you were to take a drug which acts on your lungs, so it has an ability, its activity is to remove the kapha from the or the mucus from the lungs, separate the mucus and eliminate it. So that removal of the mucus or dissolving the mucus, that is called as karma or activity. And the final outcome or the efficacy is the freeness in breathing. So the drug, as far as the patient is concerned, he now says, I am able to breathe freely. So that is the efficacy of the herb. And the activity is that the patient may not know actually how the herb worked. That was due that it was the mucus. It had a hot potency. It worked on the lungs. It worked in about 5 hours. And its mechanism was to remove the kapha from the system. And it resulted in more comfortable breathing for the patient. So in this way, Ayurveda says that we have to study each and every drug and understand the mechanism of action to the extent possible. Even though we might not be able to understand action in detail for all the herbs, we need to map it out in these headings that is shown in this slide. So, to summarize again, Ayurvedic pharmacology is the science of combinatorics. Drug action is nothing but the conjunction and disjunction of substances. So, Dravya Guna, or in Ayurveda, pharmacology deals with understanding how substances combine and separate and how this brings about change in the human body. So because this is the scientific basis of Ayurveda, we can say that it is possible, it's not impossible to study drug action according to the Ayurvedic method. We can also study it using modern tools. So when we combine these modern tools with the Ayurvedic concepts in the future, we might be able to demonstrate how these combinations and herbs work. The reason why I mentioned all this is because today people who are practicing Ayurveda outside India are facing a real challenge to get these drugs licensed and accepted by the regulatory authorities. And one of the reasons why Ayurvedic herbs or drugs are not accepted is because there is no understanding of the mechanism of action. There's no understanding what are the actual ingredients, what will they do in the human body. So the regulatory authorities tell that you simplify, you make the chemicals out of it, and then we will accept it as a drug. But in that process, the whole logic of Ayurveda is lost. And that's the reason why I say, as practitioners, we must learn this knowledge. We must begin to understand how these herbs are combined, what is the logic behind it. And we will have to convince the regulatory authorities that there's a science behind this combination. And actually these combinations makes the herbs more safe. And only when we do this, only when we explain Ayurveda through as a science of molecular combinatorics and Ayurvedic medicine, as you know, molecular cocktails. Exactly. So that is why as practitioners we have to educate people about how Ayurvedic logic is based, how the Ayurvedic science is developed. And that's why I wanted to highlight on this topic so that all of those who take this webinar will be able to, talk better about the logic behind Ayurvedic formulations and with understanding that it's really scientific and it's not really impossible to also try to demonstrate the efficacy of these herbs using tools from modern science. So what is the final logic in Ayurveda? Is that the same stuff makes the internal and external world. The 10 gunas make up the matrix that determine the properties of the human body as well as the various substances in the external world. That is why it is possible to use substances in the external world to bring balance in the human body, because the ingredients are the same. It's the same elements that make up the external universe and the internal universe of the human body. So when we use substances from outside, we use them in the right balance, then it can bring back the balance within the human body. So that's the principle. The same stuff makes the internal and external world. So using substances from outside, we can bring balance inside. So this is the guna matrix. The 20 gunas. I think you must have heard about it, but they are not actually 20 gunas. They're actually 10 continua. So we have temperature, we have viscosity, we have adhesion, we have emollients, we have rigidity, we have texture, we have weight, density, intensity, and fluidity. So these are the parameters. The human body is a balance of these 10 continua. The human body's temperature needs to be within a limit, otherwise body functions cannot happen. Viscosity needs to be maintained at a certain level, otherwise the body will not function. So all these continuum, the human body is a delicate balance of the gunas between this 10 continuum. So when we eat food, when we take medicines, this guna matrix is continuously shifting. So the guna matrix will shift from one extreme to the other. And by balancing this guna matrix, by the correct usage of diet and herbs and drugs, we are able to maintain the balance of the human body. So inside the body is the guna matrix. Outside in the herbs or the medicinal substances is also the guna matrix. So once we understand how to use the external substance to balance the guna matrix inside, then we are balancing the human body and establishing health. So what we need to do is that we need to study the Tridosha theory. The Tridosha theory helps us to understand the guna matrix in the body. And the Rasa theory, Shadrasa theory, helps to understand the guna matrix in the medicine. And once we have understood the guna matrix in the body as well as in the medicine, we are able to bring them together, and then that is treatment. So treatment is really based on the understanding, clear understanding of the guna matrix of the body. So this is what I wanted to discuss today, which is an introduction to the pharmacology of Ayurveda. And the crux of our discussion today is the importance of the combinations and how even through modern pharmacology we can better understand and appreciate these combinations. So in the next few webinars that remain, we'll go more into the actual plants. And as I said, I'll send you a list of plants of Ayurveda, and you can check out and send me back the ones that are available there so that I can prepare the next webinar based on plants that you will be actually using. Otherwise, it will not be very helpful. And then also we'll try to see how we can make simple formulations, how to cook them, how to make the medicines, and then how to actually apply them in patients. So that's what will come in the next webinars. And so for today, I would like to conclude, and thanks for the attention, and goodbye.